Hi, Sergio.
Good afternoon, Miss.
Okay, guys, so please turn your cameras on. We're gonna start today's class. You guys, please, your cameras. Okay, so today we're gonna start, this week we're gonna start with another section. Last week on Thursday, we finished the listening section. And right now we're gonna start with the speaking section, okay? Let's see what the speaking section looks like. So first of all, the speaking section, I think with some of you guys, we have seen the writing section, right? So it's similar to the writing section. How? In the speaking section, it's not all about speaking. You will have two different types of tasks. You will have independent questions or independent tasks, and you will have integrated tasks as well. Now, what is the difference between independent questions or integrated questions? Basically, independent means it doesn't depend on anything, right? So what you have to do in the independent question is basically speak, answer a question, and you're going to speak based on your own ideas, on your own thoughts. Everything will be about yourself. You know, it doesn't depend on anything. That is the reason why it's called independent. And finally, the other types of questions that you get, the integrated questions, are exactly the opposite. So in the integrated questions of the speaking section, which we're going to be seeing starting next week, you will have to always summarize something. As you can see here, you summarize a conversation, you summarize a lecture, an article, or you summarize a lecture. So in the integrated questions, you guys will have to summarize something. So your answers are going to depend on something else, on another content. And in the independent one, you don't have to summarize anything. You just have to speak about you. Okay? Now, we are going to be seeing the independent question only today and this week. Okay, so we're going to focus specifically on the independent question of the speaking section, which is question number 1. Now, how many questions do you guys see on my screen? How many questions do we have in the speaking section? We have 4, right? We have question 1, question 2, question 3, and question 4. We are going to see the 4 of them, and today we will start with question 1, which is the independent question. Okay? Do you guys have any questions before we start with this? Okay, guys, let's keep this part. Okay, and I think we have talked about this with some of you guys. So basically, The way that they evaluate your responses, these are the rubrics that they use. And I think that we've talked about it with all of you guys, right? Because I think that your group has started when we were looking at the last speaking section. But anyways, just to review, we have three big categories here that tells us how they evaluate your response. The first one is topic development, which basically has to do with what you say, right? The first one has to do with what you say when you're speaking. So whether what you're saying is coherent, does it make sense? Are you using the right amount of time? Are you being redundant? Are you repeating too much the ideas? Are you giving enough details, enough examples? Are you being specific? Are you supporting and developing your response correctly? Are you justifying what you're saying? Are your ideas connected? How do they flow? Do they flow easily? Do you have a structure? How's the progress of your ideas? Basically, topic development is what you say, how coherent it is, how well you manage your time, how developed your response is, how deep it is, and how well connected it is. Okay? So that is the first big category that you have to meet. The second has to do with how you say it, because at the end of the day, this is speaking, so you need to be able to express your ideas. You don't only need to have good ideas, but you need to be able to express them correctly, right, in an appropriate manner. So that is delivery, how you deliver, how you give your response, how you speak. So this has to do with how clear you speak, with how understandable what you're saying is, with how you articulate the words, with how you emphasize certain words by putting a stress on them, how your intonation goes, are you raising your voice sometimes, are you just at one linear way speaking, you know? So how understandable, how easy to follow your response is, and obviously how fluent you are. Do you make a lot of pauses? Do you stop to think too much? Are you using too many filler words? Are you saying all the time? Are you, I don't know, making big pauses in your response? So how the flow goes, you know? That's basically delivery. And finally, last one is language use, which has to do with the tools that you use. This is basically two things. Vocabulary, which is the range of your vocabulary. Are you using the vocabulary for a basic student, for an intermediate student, for an advanced student? Are you using appropriate vocabulary? Are you using appropriate expressions, appropriate idiomaticity? Does the words you're using go well together? That's vocabulary. And you have grammar, of course, which is, are you making too many mistakes? Are you repeating the same mistakes all over again? Are you struggling with a specific grammar point? And are you showing enough grammar variety? So are you showing the grammar that corresponds to a basic student, to an intermediate one, or to an advanced student? You know, so what grammar are you using in your response? And that is it. Okay, those are the three things they're going to be looking at in your response: topic development, delivery, and language use. Do you guys have any questions so far, or what we just said? Any questions? If you go online and you look for TOEFL speaking rubrics, then you'll find these PDF, both for the independent and the integrated questions in the speaking. What I had in my slide was like a summary, right? It was a summary of the TOEFL rubrics. But what you have here is the actual document that the ETS gives, so that you can see the way that they're going to score your response is they're going to give you a score from 0 to 4, okay? And then they're going to turn it into, or convert the score into your actual final score, which is over 30. But in the beginning, they'll give you a score from 0 to 4. And as you can see here, you have a description of how you have to have your response in order to have these scores. So for example, for a maximum score, to get a 4 score, you need to have these three things. In delivery, you need to meet this, language use and topic development. Maybe we can just read the general description so that we don't waste a lot of time. Sergio, could you please read this part here?
And the response fulfills the demands of the task without the most minor lapses in completeness. It is highly intelligible and exhibits sustained coherence. The scores our response at this level is characterized by all of the following.
Okay, thank you. And then they explain what exactly you need to have in all of the three categories that we described, right? Which were delivery, language use, and topic development. So if you want, you can take a time to read this document. It's on the ATS website. And it will give you an idea of what they're expecting and what score you can get depending on what you do. So as Sergio read, if you want a top score, then your response needs to fulfill the demands of the task. Basically, that means you need to answer the question. If they tell you what's your favorite song, you need to answer directly. This is my favorite song because of this reason and so forth. Right? So you need to fulfill the demands of the task. You need to do what they say. They say with at most minor lapses in completeness. That means that it should be very complete, right? It could only have a few details missing, but it should be very well developed. You should have enough ideas, enough examples, enough details supporting your response. It should be complete, it should be deep. Then they say it is highly intelligible and exhibits sustained coherent discourse. So highly intelligible basically means it is easy to understand. You know, the person speaks in a way that is clear, that is easy to follow, that is not tiring, that is like well intonated, well articulated, and so forth. And when they say it exhibits sustained coherent discourse, that means you're not saying, you're not talking nonsense, right? You're saying things that make sense, that are coherent to the task, that are well developed as well. And then they explain everything else, right? So that's what you need for a score of 4, which is gonna get you the top score in the independent speaking. Okay, guys, do you have any questions about that part? No questions? Okay, guys. Now, task number 1, which is the independent question that we're going to see today, is kind of like this. We're going to do an exercise right now. So for example, you have a few images in here and you have a few questions. Like, let's say I ask you, Sergio, do you prefer pizza or sushi? What would you say?
Pizza.
Okay, great. So do you see how Sergio just answered the question directly, right? I prefer pizza. That's it. Can you tell me why? Why do you prefer pizza?
I prefer pizza because I don't like fish.
Okay, great. So Sergio prefers pizza because he doesn't like fish. Great. And sushi has fish in it. What's your favorite pizza?
The traditional has cheese and jam.
Great. So that's basically what you guys are going to have to do for this task. You will have a question like this that asks you, do you prefer this or that? Do you think this is better or that's better? Do you agree or disagree? So you always have a question and they give you options, right? You have option 1, pizza, and you have option 2, sushi. And what you guys will have to do is basically choose one side. You have to pick a side as you have here. In this case, for example, Sergio picked pizza, right? And that side needs to be really strong. So Sergio wasn't like, I don't know, I like both. Or I think that sushi is better for some occasions, but pizza is not bad. Right? So he was really sure. It was like, I totally prefer pizza over sushi 100% of the time. So that's what you need to do. When you are answering the questions they give you, you need to show strength in your response. You need to choose a side and do it strongly. Okay, you can never be in between. And then you need to complete or support your response. You cannot just say, I like pizza and leave it there. You need to, as the rubric said, right, you need to sustain and develop and justify what you're saying. So you're going to include reasons to support your argument. And you're going to say, well, the reason is because I don't like fish. And you need to present these details that Sergio gave. So you need to talk about the specific details like cheese and jam. And I like this pizza. I don't like this sushi. I like this restaurant. I ate pizza this day. And you need to present details. As you can see, we have 3 layers, right? We have layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3. We have opinions, we have reasons, and we have details. And that's what you will need to have in your response. Okay? So, Micaela, what if I tell you, do you prefer calls or text messages?
I prefer calls.
Great. And can you tell me why?
Because I like to talk.
You like to talk, okay?
And I think we
And
have better communication with calls.
okay, I like that better. It's a little bit more objective, your reason. Now, what details could you give for that?
What, teacher? Can you repeat, please?
Maybe could you tell me about a time where you maybe texted somebody and the communication wasn't that clear or wasn't that easy? Or maybe a time when you called somebody directly and the communication was really good?
So I can give you an example.
Exactly. Can you give me an example?
For example, when you are fighting with a friend, and
Okay.
I think when you're talking, you can, I don't know how to explain. I don't know how to, how do you say ser más claros?
You can be clear.
You can be clear.
Okay.
In message, or I don't know how to explain, sorry.
Okay. Yes, but I think I get what you mean. So yeah, definitely. During calls, you can express better your emotions, and the tone of your voice sometimes communicates something as well. And it's harder to have misunderstandings, with calls, because sometimes with text messages, it happens that you misunderstand everything. So yes, maybe those could be some details. Great. Wilder, what about you? Do you prefer summer or winter?
I prefer winter,
Okay, and why winter?
so I can sleep a little bit more.
Okay, and why can't you sleep on summer? In summer.
Because heat is make it difficult.
Okay, so in summer or during summer, the heat makes it difficult to rest. Okay, and what details can you give me about this, related to this? Can you give me an example, maybe?
During winter, I sleep a little bit more and I do a little less sport. And I use more the heater to get warm.
Okay. So in winter, you sleep more, you do less workouts, and you use the heater to sleep. Okay. But that is not that specific, right? I would love to hear maybe more specific details. Maybe tell me, so for example, in Bolivia, the average temperature for winter is around, let's say, 30 Celsius degrees. And something like that, be specific. Or maybe tell me, for example, last summer, the average time that I spent sleeping was 5 hours, right? Something like that. Because at 6 a.m. in the morning, the sun was out, and you couldn't sleep anymore. So try to give me more details, but it's fine. And who are we missing? What about you, Gamaliel? Do you prefer, I mean, if you had to choose, would you prefer to go camping or would you prefer to stay in a 5-star hotel?
Camping or 5-star hotel? Well, I like camping. The idea to stay near to nature. I like camping. I like
Okay.
the idea.
Great. And you already told me your reason, right? So you prefer camping, or you would prefer camping if you had to choose, because you can be closer to nature. You're like,
Yeah, closer to nature. Yeah. For example, 5-star hotel, maybe in front of the beach or in the city, but all time I stay in the city or town. It's the same. But in camping, you can see animals, breathe fresh air.
okay, great. So yes, you're comparing. I like that comparison you're making. That's actually a good way to support an opinion, right? Remember that at the end of the day, what they said in the rubrics, what they asked you to do was to support your response. So there are many ways that you can support it. One way is by giving examples, or like Gamaliel was comparing a bit. So that's good as well. So yes, there's a big difference between camping and going and staying in a 5-star hotel. Okay, guys, thank you so much. So basically, that's what you guys will have to do for this task. As you can see, all of the questions we have here are everyday questions, right? They're not asking you something like, I don't know, something about the government per se, but they're not asking something about something technical about technology, right? Like something that you wouldn't know, right? They're just asking casual everyday things that you could find in a conversation with your friend, right? These are things that maybe you discuss when you're speaking to a friend. So these are the types of questions that you get in the independent question. Basically, in this question, you will be asked to give your opinion about a familiar topic. So they will give you a question about your opinion, just like the one we had. Do you prefer pizza or sushi? You always have 2 or 3 options, like, do you prefer pizza or sushi? Do you think this is better or that? Do you agree or disagree? So you always have 2 options. Sometimes you can have 3. Do you prefer pizza, sushi, or hamburgers? But you always have specific choices. And what you need to do is you can never waver between the options. That means you cannot go in the middle. You have to be strong. You need to choose one and support it with reasons and examples. You will have the question on your screen, and you will also hear the question because somebody's going to read it for you. So you will have the question, you will hear it, and after you hear the question, you will get 15 seconds to prepare your response and 45 seconds to speak. Okay, 15 seconds to prepare your response and 45 seconds to speak. Do you guys have any questions so far? Now, when I was telling you these are going to be about everyday topics, these are usually the ones that you get. So as you can see, the majority of times, this is about 75% of the time, you get one of these, the one that you have in this box. So they are going to ask you about work, about education. So that is academic life, high school, college. They're going to ask you about relationships. So it could be relationships with friends, romantic relationships, relationships with family members. They ask you sometimes about recreation. So things like going on vacation, playing video games, watching TV, reading books. They can ask you about traveling. So let's say, do you prefer to travel alone? Or with somebody else? Or they could ask you about lifestyle and health. Okay, so that means like would you go vegan or not? Do you prefer to work out once or twice a week? Do you think that it's important to force children to, I don't know, have PE at school? So those are the things that they could ask you about most of the time. And sometimes they ask you about maybe more complicated topics like technology, maybe the effects of social media, maybe if you prefer like tablets over computers. Sometimes they ask you about finance decisions, like do you prefer saving your money or maybe spending it all right away? Sometimes they ask you about the environment and global issues like maybe violence, maybe pollution. And very rarely they ask you about social or political issues, but obviously it won't be anything complicated. It will be something like, do you think that the government should be 2 to 4 years in, I don't know, in charge, or they should spend more than 10 years? Something like that. So it's never going to be something specific about politics. Okay, guys? Those are the usual topics that you have. Is that okay so far? Do you have any questions about this? Nope. Okay, guys. So let's look at this example here. Okay. Wheeler, could you please read the question we have?
Do you think it's a good idea for children to help their parents with household chores as soon as they are old enough? Use details and examples in your response.
Okay. So we have a question, right? It says, do you think it's a good idea for children to help their parents with household chores as soon as they're old enough? So what are the options here? What are the options that we have for our answer?
Agree and disagree.
Exactly. So you can say, yes, I think it's a good idea. I agree that it's a good idea for children to help their parents with household chores, or I don't think it's a good idea for children to help their parents with household chores. You only have those two options. You don't have anything else. You cannot say, well, it depends on their age. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. I think that it depends on the culture. You can never say something like that, right? You need to choose one side directly. So yes, it's a good idea 100% of the time, or no, it's never a good idea. Okay? Now we're gonna listen to a response, to a sample response. And you guys will let me know what you think, okay? This is obviously something that's prepared. It's not something that you can expect to look, but we're gonna use together to guide ourselves. Okay, so please just listen to this, pay attention.
I think it's a great idea for kids to do household chores as soon as they're old enough. First of all, this can teach children some really valuable skills that will come in handy later in life. For instance, I was responsible for cooking breakfast for my little brother every day before we went to school when we were both kids. As a result, when I went away to college as a teenager, I stayed really healthy because I could cook my own meals instead of always going out for fast food like my friends and classmates. Secondly, parents and children can do household chores together, and this gives them a chance to bond. As they work on things like cleaning dishes, food, they can chat, and the kids.
What do you think about that response we just heard? I mean, you hear it and it seems like a little bit unrealistic, right? Maybe we won't be doing something like that, but we're gonna use it as an example. We're gonna analyze. Remember, you have this question right on the screen. You will hear the question. Okay, I wasn't sharing my screen. You will hear the question and you will have 15 seconds to prepare your response, right? So you only have 15 seconds to think about this question, and then you need to start speaking already. So what we heard, although it may have seemed like more, it was only 45 seconds of the answer, okay? This is the transcript. Let's analyze the transcript that we have. First of all, we have this sentence that says, I think it's a great idea for kids to do household chores as soon as they're old enough, right? What does that look like? What is that? Do you remember the question? The question was, do you think it's a good idea for children to do household chores as soon as they're old enough, right? Or it was something like that. It was, do you think it's a good idea for children to help their parents with household chores as soon as they're old enough? That was exactly the question. So what is this first sentence that we have in here? What is the speaker doing there with that first sentence? The speaker is answering the question, right? In the first sentence. The question was, do you think it's a good idea for children to help their parents with household chores as soon as they're old enough? And in the first sentence, the speaker is directly answering the question and saying, yes, I think it's a great idea for kids to do household chores and so forth. So that answer to the question is the introduction of his response. He's introducing his response by answering the question. And do you guys think that this answer is direct? Is it easy to understand, to know his point of view by reading the sentence? Do you already know his opinion? Yes, right? We know his opinion already because it's pretty clear. He's not trying to make it too complicated here. Okay, now let's look at other things about this introduction. First of all, he's starting with I think. This phrase, one thing that I like about this introduction is that the question was, do you think? That was the question, right? Do you think it's a good idea? So he is directly answering, yes, I think. So he's using the same verb as in the question, right? Do you think? I think. Honestly, guys, I recommend that you do this. So when they ask you, do you think? Then you say, I think. When they ask, do you prefer? You say, I prefer. Do you agree? I agree that. So try to answer using the same verb because it makes it more direct. That's one tip I'm going to give you for now. Now, second thing he's doing, he's summarizing the idea a little bit because the whole idea was, is it a good idea for children to help their parents with household chores? So he's not saying, I think it's a good idea for children to help. He's summarizing it, he's shortening it a bit because obviously he doesn't have a lot of time. And he's also using some synonyms, right? Because he's not saying, I think it's a good idea. He's saying, I think it's a great idea. I like the word great more than the word good because it's stronger, right? If I said, I think it's a fantastic idea for kids to do household chores, do you see how I'm emphasizing on the word fantastic, right? I'm saying, I think it's a fantastic idea for kids to do household chores. I'm raising my voice in the word fantastic. And that's even stronger if I just say, yes, I think it's a good idea, right? I think it's a fantastic idea for kids to do household chores. I think it's a great idea. I think it's an awesome idea. So with those words, with those adjectives that you should have as vocabulary, he's making it stronger. His opinion is stronger than if he just say it's a good idea. And he's also paraphrasing and showing more vocabulary, right? And you could even use better words than great. He's also paraphrasing the word children, and that's it. And the good thing is that he's answering directly the question, right? Do you have any questions so far about what we're saying? No? Okay. So what do we have next? Then he says, first of all, this can teach children some really valuable skills that will come in handy later in life. What is that? What do you guys think that is? What's that? That's his first reason, right? So he is agreeing. He says that it's a good idea for kids to do household chores, but he cannot just say that without justifying. So he's giving one reason. He's saying, first of all, this can teach children some really valuable skills that will come in handy later in life. So what about this reason do I like? First thing, he has a nice transition. He's saying, first of all, do you remember how one of the rubrics was, are your ideas well connected? That basically means that you're using enough transitions and the correct ones. So he's meeting that criteria. And second, when he's giving his reason, he's showing a strength. Again, it is clear, it is short, it is just one sentence. It's clear, it's easy to understand, and it's a strong, right? Because he's not like, first of all, I think, or I would say that this could teach children valuable skills or some skills, right? He's not like doubting himself. He's going directly. This can definitely teach children some really valuable skills that will for sure come in handy later in life. So he is stating almost like a fact, right? He is sounding really sure about what he's saying, about his reason. And this is one reason why he feels this way, right? Why he thinks that it's a good idea. It's just one sentence. What do we have later? We have, for instance, I was responsible for cooking breakfast for my little brother every day before we went to school when we were both kids. As a result, when I went away to college as a teenager, I stayed really healthy because I could cook my own meals instead of always going out for fast food like my friends in class. So what's that?
Example.
Exactly, that's an example. So his example is way longer than his reason, right? His reason is one sentence. His example, you have, I think, you have two sentences, right? But you have a compound sentence in the second one. So it's like 3 times as long as the reason. And he has good specific details, right? He's saying, I was responsible for cooking breakfast. So this is one good detail. It would be different if he just said, for instance, I learned how to cook, right? He's being more specific. I was responsible for cooking breakfast for my little brother. So he's being very specific. Every day before we went to school, again, more details, when we were both kids. As a result, when I went away to college as a teenager, more details, I stayed really healthy because I could cook my own meals instead of always going out for food like my friends and classmates. So his example, do you guys think that it's illustrating his reason? That children learn valuable skills. So is cooking a valuable skill? Yes, according to this example it is. That will come in handy later in life. Does this skill he learned come in handy later in life? Is it helpful later in life? Yes, it is, right? Because it helped him when he went away for college. So he is definitely illustrating his reason, right? His reason was that it's valuable, that they learn valuable skills like cooking that will help them later in life, like cooking during college, right? So as you can see, his example is illustrating his reason directly. He's saying the same practically, but using details. And if you guys noticed, he has really good transitions too, right? He's saying, for instance, which means, for example, as a result. He's not saying, so when I went away, he's saying, as a result. He could even maybe change this because for something else, but it's fine. What else? What else do I like about this? I like the grammar that he's using. Do you see how he's using the past tense? First, he's using the simple past tense. I was responsible. When we were both kids, when I went away to college, I stayed really healthy. I could cook my own meals. So he is using more than one tense. And that is a good thing when it comes to showing grammar, we said, because you need to show that you know how to use different aspects of grammar. He could have even made it better, right? Maybe if he had here like a conditional and he said, if my parents hadn't taught me how to cook, I would have, I don't know, I wouldn't be so healthy right now. Right? Or maybe I probably would have had some health problems. Or maybe there. So he could even add the sentence, right? Let's imagine that he says this. So if my parents hadn't taught me how to cook, I'd probably have had some health problems during college, right? Or maybe I would have some health problems right now. Or I wouldn't be as healthy as I am now. So if he said this, for example, he would have had more grammar, right? He has a third conditional in here. So that goes for grammar. Of course, I'm not telling you to use those complicated structures, but I'm just telling you this as an example, right? He's telling about a personal experience in his answer, in his example, using specific details, using good grammar and good transitions, and his example is coherent to his reason, right? So he has one reason and one example in there. Do you guys have any questions so far about that? No questions? Okay. Now he has a second reason and he has a second example, right? He says, secondly, parents and children can do household chores together, and this gives them a chance to bond. So he has a second reason, and he has a second, not example, but details, right? He says, as they work on things like cleaning dishes, these are details, cooking food, they can chat and the kids may open up about what's going on in their lives. So the second example is simpler than the first one. It's just like an explanation with more details, but it's fine. Why? Because he already used enough details, enough examples, enough grammar in the first one. So the second one is fine if it's short, if it's not that like complete, that explained, or that detailed, So what you guys have to do in your response. Basically, the basic things that you need to have and the basic thing that you need to do in your response are the first two paragraphs. So you just need this to have a top score, okay? You need an introduction where you state your answer. You need a reason that is short but clear and that makes sense. And you need an example that has enough details and that is coherent and it is illustrating your reason, that is well connected, and if you can, that has good grammar and a variety of grammar structures, okay? That's what you need to have at top score. You need your introduction, you need your reason, and you need your details or your example with details. That's all you need, and it has to go in that order. Is that okay so far? Do you have any questions? Let's listen to another sample response, okay? Gamaliel, could you please read the question we have here? Or, I'm sorry, it's the same. I'm gonna go back here.
Do you agree or disagree with the following sentence? We can learn a lot from making mistakes.
So we're gonna listen to another sample response. I'm sorry. Listen to this. Okay.
I totally agree that we can learn a lot from making mistakes. First of all, we always remember how our past mistakes made us feel, and since they usually make us feel really terrible, we try to avoid repeating them so we don't feel that way again. We also take deliberate action to avoid it. For instance, last year before my big science midterm, I made the mistake of playing video games all day long. As a result, of course, I failed the test and I felt miserable. But I learned from that it's very important to study and to prepare for tests. So the next year, during exam season, I buckled down, I studied, and I learned a lot.
Okay, guys. So first of all, what was his opinion? What was his answer to the question in the introduction? Did he agree or disagree? Come on, guys. Remember the question was, do you agree or disagree that we can learn a lot from making mistakes? So what was his response to this question? Did he agree or disagree?
I think he agrees.
Exactly, he agreed. He says that he agrees that we can learn a lot from making mistakes. How many reasons and examples does he give?
I think he talked about the past.
Yes, that was his example. He talked about himself. So he only, in this case, it wasn't like the previous one we did. He only had one reason and one example. This is a transcript. It says, I totally agree we can learn a lot from making mistakes. That's his introduction. He has his reason. First of all, we always remember how our past mistakes made us feel. And since they usually make us feel really terrible, we try to avoid repeating them so we don't feel that way again. We also take deliberate action to avoid it. Now, in this case, since he only has one reason and one example, as you can see, his reason is way longer than the previous one, right? It's a little bit longer, but it's just one reason. And his example says, for instance, last year, before my big science midterm, I made the mistake of playing video games all day long. I failed the test, I feel miserable and sport. So this is his example. And yes, it's a personal experience. Do you guys feel that this was a complete response? Yes, it was, okay? It was a complete response. It was a top score response. And he didn't need more than one reason and one example. So that's what I wanted to, that's where I wanted to get. You really don't need more than one reason, one example, and of course your introduction to have a top score. Do you see a conclusion in here? We don't have a conclusion, right? So this is a perfect response, just the way it is, by having the introduction, one reason to support that opinion, and one example. Why? Because it has everything it needs to have, right? He's answering the question directly. I agree, then that is. He has good connectors, the appropriate ones. He has enough details in his answer, right? So he's saying, last year, that's detail, before my science midterm, a detail, playing video games, another detail. His reason is coherent, his reason makes sense and explains why it's important or why we can learn from making mistakes. And his example illustrates that reason, right? He says, we remember how our mistakes make us feel. So yes, he remembered how his mistake made him feel because he felt miserable. And they try to avoid repeating them. So he did try to avoid repeating them, not to feel that way again. He took deliberate action to avoid it, right? So next year during exam season, he buckled down, he studied, and he learned a lot. So he has good grammar too, you know. So that's a complete response, okay? An introduction, a reason, and an example with enough details and good grammar and good connectors. And that's what you guys are going to be doing. Do you have any questions so far about what we did today, about these sample responses we heard? Do you guys have any questions? Okay, guys. Okay. So I wanted to say, well, we haven't finished today's class, don't worry. We haven't seen the template yet. We haven't practiced. We haven't seen some ideas, some tips for your responses. We have basically just focused on looking at some sample responses, but it's fine. I'm taking my time with this question because we have an entire week to work on it. So we're gonna have today, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday to work on this question. We have plenty of time, honestly, maybe more than we actually need. So we're gonna take our time, okay? Tomorrow we're gonna be looking at the template. I'm gonna give you guys another sample response. I'm gonna do it myself. And then we're gonna try to practice and I'll give you some feedback and some ideas for different parts of your response. I'll give you vocabulary and so forth. Okay, guys? But do you have any questions so far about what we did today? No, no questions, nothing? Okay, guys. Then please don't forget to fill out today's survey. I just sent it to you. You could please fill it out before you go. All right. Thank you so much. I will see you guys next class. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.